Bitcoin's dominance is currently declining, just as we're waiting for the altcoin explosion. You can see how Bitcoin dominance is pulling back, and the entire crypto market is also going through a correction today. This is happening as macroeconomic data is being released in the US. Ethereum is one of the few exceptions, with a slight gain of plus 1.35%, and Tron is also slightly in the green. XRP is sitting at 2.29, while the rest of the market is mostly in red. Hype token, for example, is down nearly 6%. Chainlink, Avalanche, it's not a major drop, but there are corrections across the board in crypto today. .as I mentioned earlier, these corrections are tied to the release of US macroeconomic data, which we'll review in a moment. But first, let's take a look at Bitcoin dominance, which is falling, a sign that could hint at incoming capital flowing into altcoins. Bitcoin has dropped into the 108,000 range, and as Bitcoin dominance falls, that's typically the moment when we expect capital to start rotating into the altcoin market. That's why we're all watching Bitcoin's dominance, hoping for its decline and a corresponding drop in Bitcoin's price to see that capital shift into other assets. It's the altcoin season we've been waiting for. But unlike previous cycles, this time it's not about a meme coin alt season or speculative tokens. What we're looking for now is an alt season focused on utility projects. That's the big difference this time. Meanwhile, over in India, they've said that trade talks with the US are going well and they expect a positive outcome soon. That could mean a US-India trade agreement might not be far off. And in Europe, they're also in discussions with the US about a trade deal. So, we're watching closely to see how many trade agreements the US can secure, especially with China and Europe. Those two would be huge for the markets. China, of course, is the main competitor to the US, but any agreements will be positive news. Meanwhile, the US GDP contracted by minus 0.2% in Q1, which is actually better than the expected minus 0.3%. On the other hand, initial jobless claims rose to 240,000, higher than the forecast of 229,000. So that's an uptick in unemployment, a figure that's definitely impacting the markets. It's not a huge jump, but it's negative nonetheless. More unemployment than expected is not a good sign. So while the GDP data wasn't as bad as feared, the jobless claims are a bit of a red flag, and they're certainly contributing to the market downturn we're seeing today. And here's the document from the SEC. It says XRP is expected to be one of the digital assets the US government will accumulate as part of its strategic reserve, alongside Bitcoin and other digital assets. This is part of the initiative announced by President Trump. So the US wants a strategic reserve of digital assets, and XRP is expected to be included in that. We're still waiting on more details from Trump about how these purchases will happen, whether it's XRP, Ethereum, Cardano, or others. For now, they're prioritizing Bitcoin over the others, but XRP is in the mix. The key point is that XRP is expected to be one of the 5 digital assets in that strategic reserve. We'll have to see the exact allocation and percentage XRP will represent in that reserve. This is important because having a strategic reserve means these tokens will be removed from circulation. With less supply available and demand potentially increasing, that creates a supply shock, and that could drive prices higher. After all, the US government isn't going to buy $100 worth of XRP. We're talking millions of dollars being allocated into XRP. Also, let's talk about Heider Root, the brokerage firm acquired by Ripple. They've just launched their preferred digital asset swap services for the US market. This means they'll be using digital assets like XRP for swaps in the US market. Institutional clients in the US will now be able to execute OTC swaps with cash settlement on dozens of leading digital assets. Up until now, OTC swaps were a big part of global crypto trading volume, but were mostly unavailable to US institutions. So this is a major development, more exposure for XRP, because remember, Heider Root was acquired by Ripple, and they're using XRP for these operations. And it doesn't stop there. Heider Root is also tokenizing treasury bills on the XRP ledger, with XRP powering those transactions. That's a big deal because it shows how XRP is being integrated into financial infrastructure, not just for payments, but also for tokenizing real-world assets like government debt. Now let's see how this all unfolds, because these moves are paving the way for XRP's role in the future financial system.